The gray foxes were my professors, and they were teaching me about themselves. And with that kind of a orientation to them, I was just soaking up all the stuff that they fed me, in terms of their behavior and so forth. Down the road here, and I saw sitting over on the edge of the brush over here a little fox. I didn't even know it was a gray fox at that time. I knew so little about them, and so I was taking pictures and more and more and more as I got closer and closer and closer, and I got right to the gate, and I went around the edge of the gate. And when I did, that little fox stood up and casually walked back into the brush. And so I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And the next day, I decided to come back down here and see if there was any sign of a fox. Well, the first morning I came down here, nothing. Second morning, nothing. Third morning, just a little bit further up the road here, there were 3 young foxes playing under the edge of the brush. And when they saw me, they stopped and they looked and they went back into the bushes. And so I sat down on the end, across from where they were, and probably on the 4th or 5th day, I started taking notes on what they were doing. I didn't even think about it. I just did it, And that kicked off 12 years worth, well, we're headed in the 13th year here, of studying the behavior of the gray fox. What caused me to move in the direction of giving them names was that I really early on saw that they had personalities of their own. They were individuals, and I guess technically I could have gone on with the that scientific naming, but it seemed more natural, more real, if you will, to give them names. And so I started out just giving them names like some feature of them, that came across really strongly. And so, like Mama Bold, when she was a pup, she was pretty darn fearless. They learn their names, just like your pet dog knows its name, The foxes do too. And when they learn their names, they're more forthcoming in their behavior, and they're not as skittish. And when I talk to them, I just chatter at them, you know. They're probably not understanding any of the words, but the tone and the frequencies and all that, yeah, they're getting that. Mm-hmm. And so it makes the job of documenting their behavior somewhat easier. And then like Jane Goodall, she had to name her chimps by names too. You know, Graybeard is the most famous one of her chimps, and she had the same reasoning that I had. I joined a group of people opposing what they wanted to do out here at the Baylands. And in that group was a woman named Shawnee Kleinhaus. And she told this friend of hers, Greg Karikis, that I was doing this research out here, and he ought to get in touch with me and see what's going on. And so he started to come out with me in the mornings, and one morning he said, you know, we ought to get some trail cameras out here. So we went off and bought, I think, 4 Bushnell cameras and set them up and started to get used to those cameras. Well, there was another morning as we were developing this, probably in year 2 of the 2 or 3, somewhere right in there. And again, we were here on the road in Fox Hollow, and I said, you know, we should develop a partnership or something along those lines. And Greg thought for a moment. He said, well, what should we name it? You know, what do we call it? And right off the top of my head, I said, Urban Wildlife Research Project, you know, and it stuck. And then as we proceeded along through the first 5 years, we were starting to get some real serious recognition by the press and other places too. But we had the die-out happen. When that happened, I thought to myself, now, I don't want to see that happen ever again. And I started assessing the reason why it did happen, and came to the conclusion that the region around here, the larger landscape around here, is not really a very healthy place for wildlife. From shoreline to East Palo Alto, which is a distance of about, straight across, as the crow flies, so to speak, it's about 5 miles distance in there. The habitat is just a patchwork, small patchwork like this one here. This is inadequate for real gray foxes, say the kind you find up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Now, up there they've got all the territory they need, you know, and they can spread out. But here you get concentrations of the foxes. There's not enough territory to disperse into. Okay, and so, like over on Matadero Creek, that whole riparian habitat area in through there is easy to get into but difficult to get out of. And so that's why the population over there was so high. And with a high population like that, the canine distemper started here. And it got transported over to Matadero Creek because the foxes were interacting. Mm-hmm. And Mama Bold and Gray passed it on to Dark and to Cute and, well, the rest of the foxes that were over there at Matadero Creek. That is what told me that there isn't enough habitat to house all of the wildlife around here. Mm. And that then triggers the idea that we got to put the linkages back together between Moffett Field and Facebook. Well, I got an email from the facilities manager over there at Facebook one day, and he said, in that email, he said, we've got a bunch of gray foxes over here. There are some employees that are terrified of them, and we don't know what to do. Would you be willing to come over and take a look at the situation and advise us on what to do? So I did. I went over there. In the end, I said, make them an asset instead of a liability. And Mark Zuckerberg latched onto that, and he put his stamp of approval on it and started taking pictures of the gray foxes. And in association with that, they put up a gray fox, website. And you can go out there now and see the foxes. Well, that was on the old campus. Okay, there's still people working on the old campus, but then they built a brand new campus on just across the highway from where the original campus was. They started putting a garden in on the top, and trees and bushes and flowers and all sorts of things going in up there. And then one day I get an email from Lauren, and she says, she said, you need to come over here because we've got gray foxes up on the roof, and we want to know how they got up there. And so I went over there. We took the elevator to the top, and when I stepped off that elevator and looked at what they had built up there, I said, this is ideal fox territory. You guys have done it, That's why they're up here. Then we got to the end of where the building had been finished off, but there was another whole section that's still under construction. And it was there that the discussion turned to, well, how did those foxes ever get up here? And the facilities manager that was with us that day, he said we had gigantic ladders leaning up against the building wall. And he said the only way they could have got up there was they climbed the ladder and went up there. When he said that, I said, yeah, they do that. They can climb. I've seen them climb ladders before. And then the question becomes, where are they getting their food? And I said, I'll bet you anything that they're using the fire escapes. And sure enough, that turned out to be right. At night, they go down, they hunt, bring it back up for the pups, and live up there. And it's just a perfectly safe place to be, and they know it. We don't give wildlife enough credit. We tend to look at them mechanistically, when indeed they're not at all. So the emotional lives of these wildlife, these critters out here, is something that we have to take into account. We're going to restore the habitat throughout the baylands here. For the next probably 10 years, the restoration of the baylands is going to be top and center. It's a job that has to be done for the sake of the wildlife. And as I said in the beginning, we need to gather together all of the permits and from all of the stakeholders out there. And once we do, we can go to work.